Welcome to a very fascinating game between the two best players in the world. The game is between the world champion, Magnus Carlsen, and number 2 in the world, Liren. Magnus Carlsen has a rating of 2,881 and Liren has a rating of 2,836. This game will be very unique. I will actually show you two games with a very surprising ending. The first game will appear very ordinary, and you will see the second game will be very unique. So let's start the first game. Magnus Carlsen has white pieces and Liren has black pieces. Magnus Carlsen starts with pawn to d4 and Liren answers with his knight to f6. White pawn to c4 and black pawn to e6. White knight to f3 and black pawn to d5. He's attacking the pawn on c4. White ignores this threat and instead he moves his knight to c3. And black moves his bishop to b4, threatening the knight on c3. It's actually surprisingly that Liren don't capture the pawn on c4 with his pawn. White places his bishop to g5, threatening the black knight on f6. And black the pawn to h6, threatening the white bishop. And the white bishop captures the black knight on f6. The black queen captures the bishop on f6. And the white queen moves to b3, threatening the black bishop. Instead of moving the bishop or capturing the knight, he moves his pawn to c5 to protect the bishop. White pawn will not take this pawn, instead he takes the pawn on d5. And white takes his pawn on d5. White moves to e3, black castle, and white capture now the pawn on c5, meaning that the black bishop is no longer supported with his pawn. So instead of capturing the white pawn, he goes forward and captures the knight on c3 and check the king. The white queen captures the bishop on c3. The black queen captures the white queen on c3. And the white pawn captures the queen. Now, because of this, white has double pawn on c3 and c5. Black knight to d7, threatening the pawn on c5. White rook moves to d1, ignores that black can capture the pawn, but if black captures the pawn with his knight, the white rook will also capture the pawn on d5. So the black knight moves to f6 to protect his pawn. White knight moves to d4 and the black bishop to d7. White pawn to f3 and black rook to c8, threatening now the lonely pawn on c5. So the knight moves to b3 to protect his pawn, and the black bishop moves to a4, threatening the knight, and if he captures the knight, white has no longer protection on the pawn on c5. The white rook moves to d4, threatening the black bishop on a4. The black bishop captures the knight on b3, and the white pawn captures him on b3. The black rook captures now the pawn on c5, and the white king goes to d2 to protect the pawn on c3. The black rook moves to a5, preparing for a movement, threatening the king and his pawns. White bishop to d3, and the black knight to d7. White king makes a surprising move by moving to c1. I don't know if that is like a teasing that he wants the black rook to go down to a1. Instead, the black rook moves to c3. It's possible that that is what Magnus wanted him to do. So the white king goes to b2 and protects his pawn on c3. The black rook moves to e8, threatening the pawn on e3. And the white rook moves to e1 to protect his pawn. The black knight moves to e5, threatening the bishop on d3, and the bishop is protected by the rook on d4. White pawn to b4, threatening the rook, and the black knight moves to d3, check the king, and also threatening the rook on e1. But of course, he will be easily captured by the rook on d4. The black rook moves to b5, and the white king moves to b3. Black king to f8, and the white rook to a1. Black pawn to a6, and the white rook to a5, offering a trade between the two rooks. The black rook captures him on a5, and he is captured by the pawn on a5. The black rook moves to e5. The white king moves to b4. For me, it's a dangerous move that he go to e5 to protect his pawn. I would rather go to d8 to protect the pawn, and also he can also go forward to d7 and protect the pawn also on b7. So the white king has the opportunity to go forward all the way to the pawns on b7. So the black king moves to e7, the white pawn to f4, threatening the rook, and the rook moves to e4, check the white king. The white king moves to c5, and is now very near to reach to the black pawn on b7. However, this pawn can be protected by the black king. Instead, black rook moves to a4, and that is a surprising move that he don't rather protect his pawn on b7 instead of trying to attack the white pawn on a5. This pawn can easily be protected by the king on b6. So the white king moves to b6, and the black king moves to e6. Now, of course, if the white king captures the pawn on b7, he will instead lose his pawn on a5. So the white rook moves to d4, offering a trade with the black rook. And the black rook moves to a3, threatening the pawn on c3. The white ignores this threat and instead moves forward to e4, threatening the pawn on d5. Black rook moves to b3, check the white king, and the white king moves to c7. Black pawn captures the white pawn on e4, and the white rook takes his pawn on e4. The black king moves to f5, and you can also see that black is totally unprotected on the left side. So far the black rook is there protecting the pawn. The white rook moves, that's the reason why the white rook moves to b4, offering a trade. And if black rook will capture his rook, or capturing the pawn on c3, he will lose the pawn on b7 and a6. Black rook captures the pawn on c3, the white king captures the pawn on b7, and black rook cannot stop white from capturing also the pawn on a6. So instead, black rook moves to c2, and with a chance to capture the two pawns on d2 and h2. So the white pawn moves forward to d3. Black rook captures the pawn on h2. But now the black rook is very far from the action on the left side. So it is the white king, white pawn, and white rook. The white king captures the black pawn on a6, and the black king moves to d4. White rook moves to b3 to protect his pawn on g3. The black rook moves to a2, and the white king moves to b6. And here, the very surprising and also sad is that in this situation, when Liren is preparing for his final moves, both of the players has around 1 minute and 30 seconds. In this situation, Magnus Carlsen has 1 minute and 17 seconds, and Liren has had about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And sadly, Liren got disconnected. So Liren was declared losing this game. Magnus Carlsen win this game 1-0. But I will immediately start the next game, and the next game is a surprising game. So hang on. So this is the second game between Magnus Carlsen and Liren Ding. Liren Ding now has white pieces, and Magnus Carlsen has black pieces. And this game will be very short and surprising. As you remember, Liren Ding lost the first game because of internet disconnection. So Liren Ding starts with pawn to c4, and Magnus Carlsen pawn to e6. White pawn to d3, black queen to g5, and white rook to g2. Now the question is, what will be the surprising move that will change this game? The most surprising is that Magnus Carlsen captures the pawn with his queen on d2, and the white queen captures the black queen on d2. After this move, Magnus Carlsen surrenders. So, as the world champion, Magnus Carlsen want to lose this game. It was hard to make the first game a draw, so Magnus Carlsen decided to lose this game to make an equal score between the two players. So now in this situation, after 2 games, the two players has 1 point each. So 1 point to Magnus Carlsen and 1 point to Liren. If you want to watch more exciting, thrilling games, welcome to subscribe to our channel.